Hello, my name's Tim Shoebridge. Welcome to this video. Now, if you are a regular to my channel, which I hope you are, then you may well have noticed this particular keyboard here lurking in the shadows in many of my videos over many months now. I've not said anything about it, but today I'm going to change all that. Today I'm going to give you my thoughts and have a chat with you about this particular synth here. It is, of course, the ASM Hydrasynth. So if there's one way to find out what the Hydrasynth is all about in one simple quick maneuver, then I would suggest that you dial up the very first preset, the very first factory preset on this Hydrasynth, which is in bank A, slot number 1, and just play it, because that is the preset that ASM have chosen to showcase this synth in one single go. Now, you know, the reason I say that is because presets sell synthesizers. It's been a fact for a very long time. You know, before the internet, dare I suggest that, but before the internet, we had music shops, we had music stores. It might not be in your town, but it'll be in the next town. And if you wanted to find out what a keyboard sounded like or a synth sounded like, you would go along to that music store, that music shop, and if you didn't look too dodgy, they would allow you to actually have a go on them. They'd give you some headphones and you could sit there, stand there and play away at them. And you know, with that small precious amount of time that you have in front of an instrument, what are you going to do? You're going to flick through the presets. Starting at the beginning, A1, A2, A3, A4. And you know, those sounds might not be your kind of sounds, but they're there chosen by the manufacturer to sell you that synth, to show you the capabilities of that instrument. It's the same at trade shows. Trade shows back then were incredibly important. They're still incredibly important. Again, you have that small amount of time to flick through a synth or a keyboard and find out what it sounds like. You're going to listen to the factory presets. Now today, obviously with the internet, we have YouTube and we have, unfortunately, very few music shops left. But even on YouTube, you know, there's a lot of people on YouTube that don't take the time to really get to know the instrument. They don't take the time to create their own presets. Again, they're going to flick through those factory presets. So still today, in modern times, factory presets sell synthesizers. And I mentioned, you know, the very first preset, bank A, slot number 1. That is selected as being the most important preset on the whole instrument by the manufacturer. They must take a long time to decide which preset are we going to put there, because when you switch on the synth for the first time and just play the keys, that is the preset that you're going to hear, and that preset has got to sell you that synth. That's the whole idea about that very first preset. Now I'm mentioning all this because the preset that is on the Hydrasynth in bank A, slot number 1, is quite interesting. I'm just going to play it to you now. It's, on the face of it, the most uninspiring preset I've ever heard in my life. It's like funeral parlour. Very strange. However, it's been chosen by ASM for a very good reason, and you've just got to dare to press a little bit harder down on those keys. poly aftertouch. It is the most incredible, liberating, expressive way of playing a regular keyboard. It really is. Once you've played it, there's no going back. And that is what the Hydrasynth is all about. But don't expect it to be an instant win for you. Don't expect to just be able to switch on a Hydrasynth, sit down in front of it for the very first time and play amazing Vangelis style music with it. It's really hard. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of practice. You've got to sort of like learn that, you know, that muscle memory of how hard to press down on individual notes on both hands. It is actually really quite hard. It took me quite a long time to get into it and really get good results out of it. And to be honest with you, I haven't touched this Hydrasynth now for a couple of months. I've been doing other projects and other things, and just coming back to it today, it's like I've never touched it before. It's really, really difficult. It takes practice, so bear that in mind. You've got to be patient with yourself. It also depends on the patch itself, because how drastic that change in tone is when you press down is going to mean it's either easy or hard to play. Now this particular preset, if it was mine, I would be changing it. I'd be just sort of like toning it down a bit, because it really is quite hard to get those sort of like subtle sort of like changes with poly aftertouch. It's either all or nothing. If I hold it down very hard, that's what we get. So I'm really trying to be quite restrained with it. It's wonderful. It really is wonderful.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now, it's not just about poly aftertouch. This particular preset that ASM have chosen for Bank A slot 1, it's not just about aftertouch at all. I don't have a camera here right in front or over the top of the synth, so I'll show you, I'll do some video footage of this in a minute to show you what I'm talking about. But right here in the center, there's a set of 8 knobs, rotary encoders, and the main screen. And what you can do, you don't have to do when you create a preset, but what you can do with a preset is create what are called macros. Now macros are kind of building on top of the whole idea of a mod matrix. A mod matrix is a whole load of different modulations that you want to set up for your preset, and with a mod matrix that's really comprehensive like the one in here, you can have a mod slot modulating another mod slot. So you can have really quite complex modulations, and these macro knobs allow you to do something very, very similar, but where the sort of like the source of the modulation is being controlled, or the modulation itself is being controlled by these knobs here on the front panel. So what that means is the presets no longer are static things just with one sound. You know, on a regular synth, you've just got the ability to sort of like use a mod wheel to change the sound, and that's it. Imagine that all of these knobs are their own mod wheels, basically, with their own selection of modulations that they're able to do. That's what these macros are. They're very, very powerful, and they allow you to sort of change the whole characteristics of a preset drastically without actually understanding how the preset works, how it was put together, or actually understanding the underlying architecture of the synth at all. You can just sit down, play a preset, and twiddle with these knobs and create completely new presets out of what you've got. So this particular knob here has been defined as what's called wave. When you program a preset and create a macro, you can define exactly what you want here as the name. There's one here called thicken. I don't know what that does. Does it detune the oscillators? Does it play around with a filter? I don't know what it does, and you don't need to know what it does. It's called thicken, and it's control. But let's just play around with wave a minute. I mean, that's completely different sound now, isn't it? What else have we got? Oh, this is a sort of a Vox sample. That's not a sample, sorry, waveform. There are some really beautiful sounding waveforms that they've chosen for the Hydrasynth, I have to say. So that's wave. There's one here, a macro here to sort of add some noise, another one to add some frequency modulation, play around with effects, reverb, time or amount, delay, thicken I've already mentioned. Let's just play around with this chorus one here. So that sound there just leads me on to something else that I wanted to say while I'm sort of like standing in front of the synth here. And that is, you know, I'm on social media, and one of the wonderful things I like about social media is just be like a silent witness, if you like. I like to listen in on conversations, hear what, or read rather, what people think about instruments and keyboards. I might not hardly ever actually get involved in the conversation itself, but I really like to sort of like pick up. It's like a big radar, tells me what people are thinking about the latest keyboards and synths that come out. You know, and when the Waldorf Quantum came out, I distinctly remember there were people saying, I don't like the sound of it. It sounds brittle. It's hard. It sounds digital. Don't like the sound of it. And I've read similar comments about the Hydrasynth. People saying it just sounds hard, it sounds brittle, it sounds digital. And you know, the thing is that the Quantum and the Hydrasynth, they play wavetables. Obviously, the Quantum does other things as well. But wavetables can be basic waveforms, but they can also be, and they generally are, very complex waveforms. That's how, you know, you can take the sonic capabilities of a normal virtual analog synth and just take them into a different level, is by having waveforms that are very complex, that have lots of harmonics. And when you have waveforms that are complex, they do by themselves sound very brittle, or they tend to sound very brittle. And what you find is that when people create presets, certainly factory presets, to showcase those waveforms, then they're not going to have much low-pass filter in those presets at all. They're going to want to showcase the waveforms to you, and that's why the presets are going to sound hard and brittle, because the waveforms themselves are hard and brittle. But that's not to say that the Hydrasynth or the Quantum is a hard, brittle, digital-sounding instrument. It's not. It can be whatever you want it to be. This sound to me here sounds warm, it's bassy, it sounds like quite a few analog polysynths that I own. It sounds wonderful. It can be whatever you want it to sound like. And what ASM have provided in the Hydrasynth is quite a few little features and sort of like configuration controls to help you warm up your sounds. I think they're really quite conscious of the fact that people will say, oh, it sounds hard and brittle because it's got wavetables. But there's lots of things that you can do with the synth to warm up your sound and make it sound analog if that's what you want. And I will touch on a few of those things later on in the video. So before we get on to talking about the sound engine inside the Hydrasynth, let's just look at the hardware and the user interface, just to start off with. Now, it's clear to me that whoever designed the Hydrasynth understands synthesizers, knows synthesizers, has used synthesizers, and also has a great attention to detail. I'll just run through some of my observations about this synth, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. So in terms of the construction, this thing is built like a tank. It's got metal casing, it's solid, it's built to last. I think it's also built to be taken on the road. If you look at those knobs and those rotary encoders, there is no wobble at all. I really do think that they are fixed directly to that top panel. We've got legends on the top panel to tell you what the connections are on the back without having to do acrobatics to find out. So whoever designed this synth understands what it's like to connect up your synthesizer in a studio or some other tight space. We've got a headphone jack on the front panel, which is where it should always be, in my opinion. And we don't just have one headphone jack, we have two, and they're in both the sort of, the standard sizes, the 3.5mm and the 1/4 inch jack, and we get a little gain control there on the front panel as well. Again, attention to detail, really nice to see it. Why don't all manufacturers put headphone jacks on the front? I've mentioned the Poly Aftertouch already, but it's not just the fact that this keyboard has Poly Aftertouch, it's also how well you can configure it to your way of playing. There's a lot of control over the sensitivity and the way that the Poly Aftertouch reacts. Whoever has designed this synth has again gone into that level of detail, that attention to detail, to get this synth to be really useful and usable. And I haven't mentioned the ribbon controller on the front panel. At first I thought, okay, well that's just sort of like a bit of a gimmick. But actually it's not a gimmick at all. It's incredibly useful. And I think part of the reason why it's incredibly useful is because, again, it is so configurable. You can configure it to be absolute or relative in terms of how you use it. You can configure it to be unipolar. So on the far left side, the value is 0 and going up to a maximum on the right. Or it can be bipolar, so that the value of 0 is in the middle and you can go positive and negative. It's just incredibly useful. I've ended up using it a lot in my patches. Maybe just so I can add a little bit of reverb, I can adjust it on the fly or whatever. It's just useful to have. It's not just there for pitch bends and stuff like that. And talking of configurability and pitch bends, the pitch bend control itself is totally configurable. It doesn't have to be a pitch bend control. You can turn it into basically another mod wheel. You can turn it into whatever you like. You've got control over what the pitch bend control actually does. Now let's look at the interface itself on that top panel, and we look at that right hand section. I think it's a really big nod towards the mighty Roland V synth. I love that whole layout, showing you the synth architecture there, lit up with little buttons on the front panel. It's so easy to sort of like choose what you want to change and configure rather than having to scroll through menus. It really is a really great feature. I really like it. And what I really love about it is, okay, you've got 5 envelope generators and 5 LFOs, and you can instantly see there with the LEDs how you're cycling your LFOs, or what speed, what rate they're running at, and you can also see the cycling of the envelope generators. So when you're triggering envelope generators, you can see that cycle, how long or short they happen to be. It's really, really useful feature. And I think that the whole sort of the top panel interface with those little dedicated buttons on the right hand side, and then you've got the sort of like the sort of the main screen with those soft controls, those knobs and buttons to be able to change whatever parameters you need. It really works very, very well. It's logical, it's intuitive, and it's very, very simple and quick to use. I really do like the user interface on this synth. Just when I thought that we'd kind of run out of ideas on what to do, here is an example of a really nice, well thought out interface. And while we're looking at the top panel, you'll see at the top right there are dedicated controls for the filter section. I guess they put them there for those people that demand to have a dedicated control over their filter section. Personally, I don't think it was necessary at all. I just like using the main controls as they are, but they are there at the top right. Again, I think it's another nod to sort of like the whole real-time performance aspect of the synthesizer. It really is geared around real-time performance. Okay, so let's talk about the synth engine itself now. Now, to be honest with you, there's just so much detail to it. This is not going to be in any way, this video is not going to be a tutorial or an in-depth review of the synth engine. There's an awful lot to it. I really do advise you to check out ASM's website for information about it, and also check out other YouTube videos where people have gone into it in a lot of detail. I'm just going to give you, some of the highlights for me. Now, obviously, this is a wavetable synthesizer. It can play wavetables, which means you can play and scan through a collection of different waveforms. And when it scans through, it's basically doing an interpolation, a mathematical algorithm, to sort of like seamlessly morph from one wave shape to the next as it goes through the table. You don't have to use the wavetables at all with the Hydrasynth. You can just use static waves and just treat it as just a regular digital virtual analog synthesizer if you want to. I'm trying to think how many different waveforms there are. It's over 200. It's a strange number. It's 219 or 18 or something weird. Anyway, for me personally, I mean, I've used a lot of wavetable synthesizers over the years, and I really sort of like put off getting the Hydrasynth and trying it out, because I had got to the point where I'd kind of reached saturation point with wavetables and wavetable synthesizers. For me personally, and I know I'm probably in the minority, I don't like a synthesizer that gives me too much choice. There are some synths out there that have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of waveforms, and it's just insane. I could just, sit down and spend the rest of my life trying to find that one sound that I want. I like to have my choices kind of minimized, and the Hydrasynth for me is perfect. It has got that 200 or so waveforms. It sounds like a lot, it is a lot, but it's actually a lot less than some of the competition. And I find that there's enough variety there. The waveforms that they've chosen are really, really good and useful waveforms. I find that it's enough for me to be able to be productive with it. Because when I come to a synthesizer and I want to make a patch, I've got an idea in my head about the sound that I want. So therefore, I am searching for the waveform that matches the sound in my head. And I find with a synth that's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of waveforms, that by the time I've scrolled through them and played them, too many of them, I've lost the original idea I had in my head. I get distracted like that, and I know that's my problem. But for me, the number of waveforms that the Hydrasynth has is just right for me. It's a Goldilocks moment. It's not too much and it's not too little. So I really like that. So in terms of the wavetables, they're not pre-built for you. You have all of these waveforms to choose from, and you put them into a wavetable. You've got 8 slots in that wavetable, so you can pick up to 8 different waveforms and then scan through them, morph through them. I love the fact that they've provided silence as an option. It's this attention to detail. You've got silence as an option there, so you could have literally a bunch of different little mini wavetables inside your sort of like 8-slot wavetable. Silence is good to have because you're morphing from a waveform down to nothing and then back into another waveform, if you like. It's a really useful feature. It's very, very creative. I love the fact that they've done that. Let's briefly touch on the filters. You've got 2 filters. You can run them in parallel. You can run them in series. Filter number 1 is the most powerful. You've got, I think it's 16 different algorithms to choose from. All the normal stuff you'd expect: low pass, high pass, band pass, notch. There are some specific modeled filters in there as well. There's kind of a vocal filter. I can't remember what it's called now. But there are some interesting choices in there. Lots of filters, algorithms to choose from. Filter number 2 is not quite so powerful. It's fixed. Well, it's a variable state filter, but that's what you've got for filter number 2. Right, let's get on to modulation capabilities next, and this thing is a modulation monster. It really is. I mean, first of all, you've got, after oscillators 1 and 2, you've got these things called mutators, and they are basically a bunch of algorithms for manipulating the waveforms coming out of those two oscillators. You can do standard things like frequency modulation, oscillator sync, pulse width modulation. There's a whole load of different algorithms to do pulse width modulation. And you've got some weird stuff in there. You've got phase shifting, you've got harmonic sweeps. I don't know what that is, maybe a comb filter kind of thing going on. Very creative options in there in those mutators. You haven't got one with oscillator number 3. It's a bit of a sort of like a poor relation, oscillator number 3. But in terms of sort of like the more classic modulations that you've got going on here, you've got 5 LFOs, you've got 5 envelope generators. The LFOs have got a whole load of different waveforms. They've got sample and hold in there as well. They can be a little step sequencer, up to 64 steps, I think it is, the LFOs. You've got things like fade in and delay on them, very, very powerful. The envelope generators are incredibly powerful as well. They're not just ADSRs, they're 6-stage envelopes. They've got a delay, and then the attack, and then a hold, and then decay, sustain, release. So they are very, very complex, or you can create very, very complex signals out of these envelope generators, and you can loop them as well. So you've got massive modulation capabilities, and then of course we come on to the mod matrix. The mod matrix has got 32 different slots in it, so that's a large number. I mean, you think of a Moog 1 as being a modulation monster. It's got 20 modulation slots in it. We've got Hydrasynth, it's got 32 in it. 32 is more than enough, and you can get a mod slot that controls another mod slot if you want to, so you can build up some really, really complex modulations. It really is a modulation monster. You can spend an awful lot of time coming up with some really creative sounds with this synthesizer. So while we're talking about the synth engine, there's just a couple more things I want to mention. The first one is stereo. Now, when it comes to stereo with a synthesizer, if you go to the mixer section, you can actually pan each of the oscillators where you want them to be in the stereo field. So basically, from the mixer all the way through the filters, amplifiers and effects and out, it's all stereo, which is fantastic to see. But you've also got the kind of sort of stereo spread capability that you would see in, say, a sequential Dave Smith synth, but it's even better than that. So not only have you got control over the spread, the pan spread, what do they call it? Stereo width, sorry, the stereo width control in the Hydrasynth as to, as a voice plays, whereabouts does it appear in the stereo field. You've got control over that, but you've also got control over the algorithm that's used to place those voices in the stereo field. So you can have very predictable ones where it rotates round, or random ones, and there's a third option as well. So you've got a lot of control over the stereo capability of the synth, and I really like that. So the last thing to mention on the synth engine and the voicing of this Hydrasynth is something I alluded to right at the very beginning of the video, which is ways that ASM have provided us with to sort of like give a bit more of an analog feel, a bit more of a vintage vibe to the sound, if that's what you want. There are 3 parameters there in the voicing menu, if you like. The first one is called Analog Feel. I can't remember exactly what it does, but I believe it's loosening up the envelopes, the timings of the envelopes, and it's also adding a little bit of unpredictable detune to the oscillators as well. So it's kind of equivalent to that vintage knob that you get on certain sequential synthesizers. The other 2 options that you've got are, we've got something called warm mode, which is basically, changing the frequencies of the sound, sort of boosting the lower frequencies, giving you that warmer tone. And you have got something called random phase, which is giving some randomness to the phasing of the oscillators. So those 3 parameters, they're all subtle, but they all contribute to giving you nice warm analog vintage vibes if you want them. Okay, so conclusion time, I guess. I appreciate that I rattled through an awful lot of capabilities and features of the synth very, very quickly. Quick fire kind of thing, and there's just so much to this synthesizer. I mean, there's so many things I've missed out. It's not been a comprehensive list that I've given you of all the features. There is so much to it. It is packed full of features, full of capabilities, and that's on top of the fact that it is a poly aftertouch keyboard. I mean, how many other poly aftertouch keyboard synthesizers can you name? Ones that have a proper keyboard. If I sound like I'm gushing in this video about this synth, that's because I'm gushing about it. It is a work of art. It's genius. It's brilliant. I think it's probably one of the most important synthesizers to be developed and released in the last 10 years, certainly in terms of digital synthesizers. It really is, and I absolutely love it to pieces. It is a permanent feature in my studio now. If I just want some sounds, I'm not looking for something very specifically analog. If I want some sounds, I want to just get down, tweak some controls, create some synth sounds, then this is the thing that I go to. It's got wavetables in it. I think out of all of the patches that I've created with it, less than half actually utilize wavetables, actually utilize any scanning of waveforms at all. I'm just basically using the individual waveforms, and there are a lot to choose from. And I'm kind of using it like a virtual analog synth, but with an awful lot of capabilities in it. It really is very capable. Now the thing is with this Hydrasynth is that it's just 100% geared towards performance, live performance, with the real-time controls, the macro knobs, the potentiometer filter controls you've got at the top here, the fact you can completely take over the pitch bend and mod wheels, you've got the ribbon control here, you've got poly aftertouch as well. It's very much a performance instrument, and I don't do any live performance. I'm just using it here in my studio, but still I'm finding that it's incredibly creative and very expressive. None of my patches I'm really programming any macros, because I just don't need to. If I'm sitting here in the studio, I want predictability. I want to be able to recall the same patch that I recorded something with yesterday, because I want to redo it, add a little bit to it, and I want exactly the same sound that I had yesterday. So I don't want to have been messing around with macro knobs and creating something that I haven't saved as a preset. So for me in the studio, I don't use quite a few of the features of the synth, but still there's enough here with this synthesizer that, as I say, it's a permanent feature now in the studio. Is it perfect? No, of course it's not perfect. No instrument is perfect. What don't I like about it, or what niggles I have? I mean, I've only got little niggles, really. I mean, for me, it doesn't have enough polyphony. It's not multi-timbral. I'd like to be able to layer sounds. Now, obviously, those two criticisms have just been blown out of the water by the announcement of the deluxe version, which is bitimbral, allows you to layer and stack, and has 16 note polyphony. So that's a synthesizer that I might well look at in the future, although I actually don't have room for one that large. The other thing I can do in terms of polyphony, I haven't mentioned it yet, is you can polychain these together, polychain, say, the little desktop module with this, and increase the number of polyphony that way. Maybe you can do layering as well. I'm not sure. I haven't investigated it, but that's obviously another option. What niggles do I have? I think the user interface is absolutely brilliant. It really is. And there are just a few tiny little things that I'd like to see improved, and maybe they could be improved in firmware. When it comes to setting values with these soft knobs here, there is a shift function so that you can get sort of fine tuning, if you like, and choose values to a greater level of accuracy. But I still find that is not quite perfect. There's a kind of lag when you turn a rotary encoder before it starts to record your movements, and I'm finding that I'm sort of like taking a little while. If I know a number that I want to dial in, I'm finding it sometimes a little difficult to dial in the level of accuracy that I want. It would be nice if that was looked at and improved. When I'm browsing through the presets, or I know that there's a preset that I want, and I'm scrolling through, there's a way to jump from bank A to B to C to D, but I'd like it to be faster to go to the one that I know that I want in the list. It would be nice if there was some kind of sensing of how quickly I'm turning the rotary encoder and accelerating through the list and then decelerating. I've seen that kind of functionality going on in Dave Smith's synthesizers. He's really got that sort of like, you know, in the bag. And I'd like to see that here. And it's the same thing when you're choosing a waveform. If you know you've got over 200 waveforms to choose from, you know which one you want. It's somewhere down in that list, and you're going to have to keep scroll to get it. I know I've complained about synthesizers that don't even have a data entry control. This one does, and I'm still complaining. But it'd be really nice to scroll through those waveforms if it sensed that it would accelerate and then decelerate through the list. I'm sure you can do that in firmware, and it would really make it perfect for me. What else? Just looking at my list of niggles, which is very, very small. The macro knobs, although I said I don't really use them, if I was to use them, it just kind of occurred to me that they're unipolar. They're like a mod wheel. They go from 0 to maximum, and the macro knobs go from 0 to a maximum. And wouldn't it be nice if they could be set to bipolar? So by default they'd be at 0, and then you could make them positive or negative. I think that would be really, really cool. I mean, maybe there's a way of doing it and I haven't noticed it, or maybe it's already in a firmware update, I don't know. But I think that would be really nice to be able to have unipolar macro knobs. What else? Bugs. I have noticed some bugs, and I think they're all related to, they might all be the same bug, I don't know, but they're related to me controlling this synth via MIDI. Now I'm using the DIN ports in the back, I'm not using USB, but I've noticed some glitches, some hanging notes and some weird sounds going on. And I'm using a very, very standard setup here that I use with all of my synthesizers, so I know it's not my setup, I know it must be the Hydrasynth. So there are some bugs, but you know what, it's a digital synthesizer, you're going to have those to start off with. I haven't updated the firmware at all since I got it, so maybe I should do that. That's really it. I'm gushing over this thing. I love it to pieces. I love the sounds I'm getting out of it. It's up to you what sounds you want to get out of it, to be honest with you. It's got filters, it's got oscillators, it's got waveforms, it's got envelopes by the ton, it's got LFOs by the ton, it can do incredible modulation. It's entirely up to you what you get out of it. So don't complain about the presets that you're hearing. Go and make your own and see what you can get out of it. It is a digital synthesizer, it is not an analog synthesizer. The filters are emulations of analog circuits. They're not going to be the same, and that's true with any single digital synth out there. It's a real workhorse. I love it to pieces. I can't say enough positive things about it. It's brilliant. That's all I've got time for in this video. I'm grateful for you to reach the end of this video with me. If you've enjoyed it, please hit that like button, consider subscribing to my channel, and until the next video, as always, thank you very, very much for watching. Oh, and I should mention I've been playing the same kind of tune all the way through this video rather than giving a lot of variety. That's because when I got the Hydrasynth and I was starting to create some music with it, create some patches with it and get to know it, I just got locked into sort of like some incredible creativity with it, and I started to write a song with it. And I know that the patches that I'm playing in this song that you've been hearing are very vanilla, but that's what I put into my songs. You know, they're vanilla synth sounds, and I've tended to sort of like levitate towards creating you know, approximations of other instruments. So I've got lots of electric piano patches on here, I've got organ patches, I've got some vocals and chorus and those kinds of patches going on in here. Choir is what I was trying to say, not chorus. And those are the kinds of patches that I've been creating with it. And you know what, they might not be showcasing the synth, but they are what I want to get out of it. And I got locked into this whole sort of like wonderful creative process, concentrating on making that song. I'm going to play it all for you at the end here so you can hear it in its entirety. It's not going to be full of weird bleeps and bobs and you know, random sounds. It's just vanilla sounds, and that for me is the use for this instrument, is to just walk up to it, create some wonderful sounds that fit into a song. That's it. So that's all I wanted to say on that one. Song coming up. Until the next one, thanks very much indeed.
do in life will be insignificant. But it's very important that you do it, because nobody else will.
How I want you to remember me for all time. This is how I want